All right. So once again, thank you, everybody. Good afternoon. You are here for the WIOA RSA-911 Services Reporting information session for staff. It is co-presented today by RSA IT and program staff. I am the program staff. My name is Natalie Guzman. I'm the Performance Improvement Manager for RSA. Introduce our IT staff in just a minute. It is still August 2023, at least for a couple more days. All right, here is our session outline for today. We did get started a bit late today, so I will probably truncate my portion, just make it a little less. Really, the most important information is going to come from Gina today. So hopefully you'll see in our session outline today, do a little bit of introductions and some purpose. I will then talk about the WIOA and federal RSA 911 guidance. For those of you who've been in previous RSA 911 sessions, I did change up the portion of my slides, mainly for this next piece, which is the state of Arizona. We really want you today to walk away knowing what have we covered so far with WIOA and where can we find the summaries of guidance and resources that these sessions have been providing. Then Gina, as I said, the most important part, she is going to take you through purchased and provided services. There is a Word document that I will put in the chat right before she goes through her section. And I always forget the Q&A parking lot, but I will put that link in the chat here, probably right after my portion, because most of the questions are likely going to come during Gina's portion. And as we always say with part of our purpose is we typically like to turn these Q&As into some kind of fact sheet, frequently asked questions that, so we really want to encourage you as you have questions, please ask your questions. We just want to remind folks it never fails. If you have that question, likely somebody else has that question too. So we really want to thank you in advance for your questions. And before I move the slide, I'm going to ask Gina to come on and introduce herself for a minute.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's great to see you again. I'm Gina Verdugo, and I'm part of the RSA IT team. I am the supervisor for the data portion of the IT team. So we are the friendly neighborhood 911 folks on the other side of the house. Lots of reporting, lots of data review, and so that's what we're doing here to kind of give you guys some backup and hopefully help get everyone to know exactly what you're doing out in the field.
Thank you so much, Gina. There I am. Okay. So our first slide, introductions and purpose. We say this every session, but it's because we really want you to hear it. And that's that we truly recognize the great improvements of staff completing the quarterly WIOA 911 documentation. Of course, these sessions are meant to further assist staff. We started with supervisors and managers. So just going to pause here for a minute because I know there was a lot of confusion about this session today. And so I will say that the supervisors, your supervisors and managers were invited to their own services process, purchased and provided services even before the staff info sessions. So we do that in the hopes that your supervisors and managers will know in advance what their staff is going to learn, and so that they should be able to further assist you because, again, they've also had this session. And some of them have even been going to the staff sessions with their staff, which I think is very, very helpful. But of course, we want to assist everyone in further understanding why the 911 reporting data elements are so important and how this crucial information is used by federal RSA to continue to support Arizona vocational rehabilitation. Again, Gina is going to share a recently created WIOA purchased and provided services document, which includes instructions and examples. That's why her portion is much more important. And again, that obtaining feedback from staff with understandings that this is an effort of continuous improvement. This is why we've had a different subject each info session, because we recognize it's not a one and done. And there will probably additional info sessions moving forward. So to pause very briefly and talk about the WIOA and federal RSA 911 guidance, this is a reminder for some, but it's new information for others, in that the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, otherwise known as WIOA, amended the Rehab Act of 1973, which changed how VR program outcomes are measured via the Case Service Report, otherwise known as the RSA 911. Federal RSA uses the data collected through the RSA 911 to assess the performance of the VR program through the calculation of evaluation standards and performance indicators. If we don't show what we're doing, we risk not getting funded. The RSA 911 currently collects and reports the following required WIOA performance indicators: the employment rate second quarter after exit, the employment rate fourth quarter after exit, median earnings, credential attainment, and measurable skill gains, or MSG. Again, for some, they're like, oh, we absolutely know about our quarterly reporting, but for others, must understand that state VR agencies, so not just Arizona, all VR agencies across the US must submit RSA 911 data to federal RSA on a quarterly basis in accordance with the following schedule. We just started our new program, July 1. So it's July 1 program year, July 1 through September 30th, October 1st through December 31st, January 1st through March 31st, and April 1st through June 30th. The quarterly reporting period requirement was made on purpose to create a natural structure for VR agencies and leadership staff to analyze, improve, and correct data. VR counselors and other designated line staff are responsible for entering timely and correct information for every individual being served. Okay, so here's the good stuff I really wanted to focus today, my portion anyway. And again, this is the summary of guidance and resources. So again, reminder for some who weren't even around when we started this. So back in December of 2020, so actually a few years ago now, is when we started this WIOA training series. We started with measurable skill gains, and those sessions were provided for VR staff to learn about MSG as related to the WIOA and the core programs affected by the law. We have a couple of resources now, a checklist and a guide on our SharePoint. Then in this calendar year, Gina and I started partnering. So in January 2023, we offered desk aid info sessions. Those sessions were specifically provided to assist the VR field staff in completing the 911 quarterly documentation. And essentially, Gina walked us through the biggest common errors that we have. And she created this resource of quarterly certification common error tip sheets, which again is on our SharePoint. And then, well, a few months ago, starting in May and carried over through June 2023, we had the post-exit reporting info sessions. And those sessions were provided to assist the VR field staff in completing the post-exit reporting. So the second quarter after exit, fourth quarter after exit. And so Gina took us through a series of examples on how we do post-exit reporting. This little briefcase icon that's on the screen, I know some of you can't see it. It says all resources can be found on the RSA SharePoint. WIOA RSA-911 Resources Library. And I'm not sure if my screen changed, it may not have, but what I wanted you to know is that all these resources can be found on SharePoint. Please do not forget that is your go-to, and look for that WIOA RSA 911 Resources Library. The last thing I believe that I will say is just as a reminder about our rates for our program years, what we negotiated. I did actually take a peek from our performance tool just to see where we landed in regards to our performance goals. And I can tell you we're pretty close to the program year 2023 negotiated, or program year 2022. And so it will be very interesting, I think, for all of you to see where we landed. We'll be getting that information to all of you soon and what that means. Because again, the negotiation means that we speak with federal RSA. We look at what did we achieve in the past, and we try to do better every year. And that's really what the feds expect of us is, oh, if you can, we negotiated program year 2021 20%, and then we achieved 38.6%, which was wonderful. And that's what they want to see, is that we continue to increase and we continue to, again, do better. And we thank you for being here, because it is part of that do better, meaning how can we explain better to our field staff? What more resources, aids can we offer in regards to support? So that was really my portion. Just again, wanted to go over some reminders. The other piece on this slide that I just want to point out is something called a performance negotiations tool. I took the supervisors and managers through that tool, but it's a place where if you clicked that link, it'll literally take you to federal RSA, and there's something called the negotiations tool where you can look at all of Arizona's data, and you can even compare it to the other states. Where are the other states falling in their performance measures? So just wanted to show you guys that. Any questions for anybody before we move on to Gina's portion? Just letting in one other person, so glad they got in before Gina's portion. Any questions? Yeah.
Let's
All right.
upload the FAQ before I dig in. There are several questions already on the FAQ from a previous session. So for those of you that are logging in today, know that we want to continue to build that. So please don't hesitate to add questions. And then after the session, we'll go in and we'll make sure to add additional resources for you there in case there's anything that is remaining. The other thing I want to say is, congratulations. First of all, I heard all the names from the field staff this morning, and you guys just do such a great job. We know how busy you are, and just really cool to be able to see that recognition from our leadership. So you've got the link to the Q&A document, as well as the link to our PowerPoint. So both of those resources should now be available to you. And then I think we just need to pull up the PowerPoint and we'll be good to go. So what we're going to be talking about today is the services portion of the WIOA certification form. One of the things, I'm sorry, somebody just told me my camera is not on, so thank you if you need to see who I am. Okay, there is a section on your WIOA form that talks about services and the services that you provide. So the reason that we're talking about this section today is we want to get further clarification to what those details are in that section, how to fill it out, and then the why behind it, which is probably the thing that matters most to any of you. That services section shows the work that is being done by you and by the vendors that you're contracting with to provide the things that your client needs to be able to gain success in their VR plan. So obviously our goal is to make sure that you get credit for all the work that's getting done. And so that's our goal for this section. Make sure that we're displaying all the work that's getting done during a quarter. All right, so we're going to start with this section to kind of define the difference between a purchased and a provided service. This is a common question. And often people will ask, do we log both of those things? And the answer is yes, we're going to log both. A purchased service is a service that we've paid for during the quarter, meaning an authorization went in through the purchasing process and a check got cut to a vendor. So that's what we call a purchased service. If a payment has been made on a service that's provided during the quarter, then the service section of the quarterly will automatically be updated, and there isn't necessarily anything additional that you need to do if all that happened is a payment got made. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later on down in more detail, where I do have a screenshot for those of you who do better with the visual. And I'll explain a little deeper. The provided services are the services the client has participated in. So think about participation versus payment is what we're talking about. So even if we aren't paying for the service during the current quarter, we want to make sure that we state these are the things that our client was doing during the quarter. So that's paid services, comparable benefits, and any in-house services that you or the staff in your office are providing directly. We need to update that service information when it's provided and no payments have been made in the quarter, or when services are provided by a comp benefit. On those scenarios, we want to make sure that we don't forget them, and the only way they get added is when you add them onto the document. So let's take a look at this next section. You're going to see these items on the form. It asks you about the most recent career service. So I've got a screenshot of that little section that you come to, and the only thing you're filling in here is a date. But the question often comes up, what exactly is the date that you want me to put in this box? So for those of you that are new, hopefully this will help you this quarter. This date that's going in the box, it can be prior to the reporting quarter. So if the last service that a client participated in was in December of last year, that is a completely valid answer. Maybe they're a closed client now. However, you cannot post-date them. We can't say what's happening in the future. Most of the time, if we see a post date in here, it is an error, and it's generally speaking the year that gets transposed. So just if we find them, we fix them, but I want you to know what that looks like. Okay, so what qualifies as a career service would be the next most common question. So I've included a screenshot of all the different services that are considered a career service. So on this list are assessment, diagnosis and treatment of impairments, vocational rehabilitation counseling and guidance, job search assistance, job placement assistance, short-term job support, supported employment services, information and referral services, benefits counseling, customized employment services, and extended services. Anything on that list counts as a career service. So if they've done any one of those things during the quarter, that could be the date you're putting in that field for most recent career service. All right, let's take a look at that next section. Okay, you're going to see this statement in a couple different places. So we want to make sure that we all understand a provider type is required for all services provided by the our agency purchase or comparable benefit. So if you mark a service as provided, there must be a provider type. The reason that we have it in multiple places and highlighted here is that this particular error accounts for approximately 50% of the errors that we have on our forms. So we're going to go through this and give you some examples as well, and hopefully that will answer some of those questions. Thanks, Thor. I appreciate that you can put that up there because I will say it's clear that this is a confusing area for everyone. I've asked those questions myself. So let's talk about how they divide out. We provide services in 3 ways. In-house, purchased by the agency, which means an authorization, or a comparable benefit. And in any of these particular scenarios, someone is providing the service. The provider type, this is information only, but if you're curious and want to know where it comes from, this gives you a resource. It is a data field that's on the vendor information form, and it hadn't dawned on me, but it's actually also on the IPE. When you're choosing your provider, this is a field that you're going to see in there. And it'll be in a little drop down to the side of where your service is at. When a payment is being made for a service that's provided within the quarter, the purchase service provider type data field in the section under the services table is automatically filled in. So an authorization gets paid, a check goes out to the provider, and automatically the system updates this form to say, hey, a payment got made and this is who it was made to. The other interesting fact is that most of our service providers, our vendors, Wedco, for example, that are in our system are typically under the heading of other private service providers. So keep that in mind as you're filling them out. And we'll talk about a couple of examples where that could be different, but most of them are going to say other private. Okay, let's take a look at service types. So you can kind of define these terms and get a visual. When you're looking at the WIOA form, you're going to see this grid on your screen. And if you'll notice, there is actually a sliding scale at the bottom, that gray bar that slides from right to left if I'm actually in Libra. So you see it there at the bottom. Thanks, Natalie. If you slide to the right, there are more columns that are in this particular, and we'll give you a snapshot of what some of the items are that are on this grid when we have an expanded chart for you just below. But what you're looking at here is all of the service categories. Now, in this example, you see 4-year college or university is in bold. And what that tells me is that that particular service has been marked provided in one section or another. So if I follow the line for 4-year college in this example, you'll notice that provided is in the second column there, technically the third, that says purchased by agency. That tells me that that particular service has an authorization attached to it, okay? The items that are not in bold have not been updated. However, common question, can I mark more than one? And the answer is absolutely. So we're going to look at some examples of what that would look like. Okay, so let's dig down a little bit into the section. Okay, first fact, the VR cost column. It's one of the hidden columns that little slide bar can be used for. You'll see it here because we expanded the grid, but it's hidden over in that back corner. That VR cost column gets updated to show an amount after the payment gets batched. So if no service is provided in the quarter, and no additional information is needed by you, it's just going to show a dollar amount. So if you now look at that example where it says 4-year college and university, you'll notice that under VR cost, there's an $18.50 in that field. That field was automatically generated in the system when a bill got paid. Now, if a payment is made in the current quarter for a service, and it was actually provided in the previous quarter, the VR costs are going to update, and then the service may not update to say provided. So you'll notice that where it says purchased by agency in this example, it says provided. That field is not going to be automatic. You will have to update that to be able to tell the system, not only did we pay for a service, but my client also attended school. So you want to verify that that gets plugged in. Now, previously you heard me say that if we mark something as provided, we also need to mark a provider type.
Yep.
Go ahead. In this example, that four-year college university was provided by another public service provider, and I would assume that's a state university in this example, or potentially a community college, because it's a public service provider. Okay, let's scroll down a little bit. I think we have one more example on there. This one here, the job readiness training, if you'll notice, the first three spots there say not provided, not provided, not provided, and then there's a dollar amount. That dollar amount means that a bill was paid, but the person was not participating in the service during the quarter. So we paid the bill for something that happened in the past. All right. Now we can scroll through this just for you to get a look at the rest of the chart so you can see all the different categories. But we're going to jump to the next section. There's quite a few. And like I said, you can choose as many as are applicable to your client. Okay, so we said if a service is marked provided, you must choose a provider type. The list that you see here is what are my options as a provider type. So expanded out that list for you in the little, you've got a screenshot, but I put it in the little box there just a little clearer to be able to see that one. The codes that are listed in there, it gives you an idea what are these things. And then there's definitions as well in the system that will tell you more about what that service is. So the first one, a public community rehab service, that and the second one, private community rehab service, Arizona doesn't really use these. So those two you're not going to have. These are typically larger programs that are operated by the state that are providing rehab services, but that's not most of our providers. Our providers are going to fall in number 3 and number 4. Okay? Yes, most of ours are going to fall in that. So you're having other public service providers. Public services are going to be like the schools, ASU, U of A, NAU, the community colleges. That's typically where you're going to see those fall in. And then your private service providers are going to be your average vendor, but that also could potentially include a private school. So an example of that in the Phoenix area is going to be Grand Canyon University. They're actually a private school, not a public school. And so those might be some examples of what you would see there. So this is a good little cheat sheet to help you determine which one you're going to pick. Again, vendor information forms and data from your IPE are the other place that you can find that. And there are some examples of that screenshots on the Q&A. All right, let's take a look at that next section. Okay, so now we're going to talk examples because I think this is hopefully going to answer some of those questions for you, Thor. Examples of services that could be provided by the VR agency staff. So that means in-house. So that's you. That's a VRC, that's an RT who's running maybe a job readiness program. That's any of those in-house services that we're not charging for, but we provide because we have internal information. So things you could count would be vocational counseling and guidance, or VCG. Job readiness training, which is your JRT that's offered by VR staff. Information and referral. And by the way, we overly, let me rephrase that. We highly underrate this particular option. I know you guys give tons of information and referral to your clients for community resources and info. So make sure you take credit for that when you do. We want to make sure that they understand the work that you're doing. Benefits counseling is another one. If you're offering that in-house, maybe you're the person taking them through that conversation as opposed to sending that out to a vendor. Pre-ed services, all of your pre-ed services, you could be participating in, and there's 4 of them you'll notice listed here. There's one that is not on that list. But any of those services, you could be offering, even if it's just a portion of those types of explanations and interactions with your clients during any given quarter. So these are common things that you could list as offered in-house. And I'm sure you probably do it way more than you guys are documenting on there. Okay, So in our example here, this particular one says that vocational counseling and guidance was provided in-house. And then you'll see junior community college is bold there. But if you look over, that one says it was provided in the third column, which is actually a comparable benefit. And so you can kind of see the difference in how those things are listed. Now on that VCG, this is how you enter the information onto the form. You'll click on the vocational counseling and guidance in the box, and then down below the screen, these are the items that are going to pop up. By VR agency staff in-house, you will have a drop-down box to the right, and you'll drop that down and you'll mark it as provided. When it is an in-house service, the in-house is the provider type. So you are the provider. There's no additional information that has to be entered with that. So that's the first thing you're entering. So in-house services, you mark it provided, and you're done. All right, next section. Now, this is an area that is also kind of confusing. We talked a lot about services that are offered before they go into plan and offered after they go into plan. So hopefully this gives you a little bit more clarity around that. But there is a rule within federal RSA that says only certain services can be provided pre-plan or before an IPE is written. So this is the list of what federal RSA allows us to include pre-plan. Now, what I often see is there are some services that are not on this list that maybe are being offered as a comparable benefit during pre-plan, but we cannot include them on that WIOA until after the client is in plan if they're not on this list. Okay, so this will be a cheat sheet for you to make sure that we're including the correct services. So only these RSA-911 service categories and pre-ed are allowed in pre-plan. They do not require an IPE. So you've got disability-related skills training, assessment, VCG, information and referral, benefits counseling, transportation, maintenance, rehabilitation technology, personal assistance services, reader services, and interpreter services. So any of those are allowed in pre-plan. And then we've listed the pre-ed categories for you so that you have them handy, and they're all there for you. So any of those can also be offered pre-plan. All right. Any other services, make sense, need to be provided under a plan. So this means that we cannot be marking them as purchased by VR, provided by comp benefit, or in-house, as all of those options do create an error. So if it's not on this list, it doesn't go on before they go into 13. All right. So there's that reminder again. Provider type, required for all services that are provided, marked as provided. There's that list for you again of the different selections that you're going to have. And these are going to come in the form of a drop-down. So we're going to take a look at some examples and how you would fill it out. If a service is purchased, that is a service where we have an authorization in the case file. We might have documentation from a vendor because you're getting a report for what's happened. Definitely that service is going to be on the IPE, and a payment may have been issued for that. So if on the other side, let's say that something isn't completely filled out, and we at the IT department have to validate that information to complete an entry, we are going to have to see these things in order to make it true. If those aren't there, we cannot include it. So as you can imagine, you might have 50 clients, but we potentially have up to 500, and there's 2 of us. It takes quite a bit of time to be able to go through and validate all of that. And it's not going to be as accurate as what you can do because you know the client better. So we want to make sure that you have the opportunity to get the best information on your client in there every quarter. Okay, So let's take a look at this particular entry. The highlighted portion tells you we're looking at assessment. In this case, it has been updated to say purchased by agency. When I click on assessment, that what I will see below, service provided by, we're focused on the middle section. VR agency purchase will be marked as provided, and the provider type is an other private service provider. So that assessment, let's say the person went for some type of a psych eval. That psych eval was offered by a psychologist who is a private service provider contracted with RSA. That's exactly the answer that you would be entering in. If for whatever reason that particular service also had a payment made on it, you're going to also see a little box pop up in there with a dollar amount in it. You do not need to do anything with it. Okay, so that's the provided service where we've paid for it. Let's take a look at the next example. So here's the other one, or with the comparable benefit. And you guys are great at documenting comparable benefits. So giving our partners credit is definitely a strength for our agency. In this example, the person attended a junior or community college, and you'll notice that it's marked as provided in the comparable benefit column. What that tells me is that we did not pay the funding for their tuition. So the example just below, you will see service type, junior or community college, and let's scroll down to the comparable benefit section. Where highlighted, you'll notice that it's marked as provided by comparable benefit. And in this case, you see that it has provider 1, provider 2, provider 3. You can add up to 3 different providers for any service in regard to comparable benefits. So the way this reads to me, I would think that they probably had a class that was paid for maybe on a college, the actual college's scholarship fund, because it's listed as post-secondary. So typically that's like if I'm going to Mesa Community College, it might be a Mesa Community College scholarship. Other could be another source of funding, like a family member, or maybe they got some other outside sources of funding to be able to help pay for that. Now, other, remember, is a catch-all. So we want you to know what are all the different categories you can choose from. And so we actually pulled that chart for you so that you can see them in this section. So this will be a good cheat sheet for you guys to be able to kind of get a good sense of what options do I have. So comparable benefit providers, let's take a look at them. And scroll down to that next section. So this is a pretty comprehensive list, and all of these are in the system. So I want you to get a feel for what can go in there. Access, a medical health provider. So maybe the client has been marked as receiving diagnosis and treatment from their doctor, and they're an access paid client. That's where that might come in. Hill-Burton medical provider. I'm actually not sure what Hill-Burton is. I'm sure it's a specific source of funding, guys. I don't know that I've ever seen that one filled in. Behavioral health services, mental health providers. That's going to be for all of you folks who have SMI clients, or your clients are attending a clinic for services. Other health department services. We might even have, I don't think they have listed on here the Indian Health Services, so that might be an example that you might see here. If they have private insurance, maybe it's a student and they're on their parents' plan. JTPA training, which is part of the Wagner-Pfizer Act. So that's your folks that are going to Arizona at work and they're receiving services paid there. So that's that section. If you have a veteran who's getting GI Bill funding, so maybe they're going to school and GI Bill is paying for that, that gives you an option for those. VA rehab. If you have a client who is working with us and the VA, you very well could have something paid for by us and some paid for by them. And this is also where you're going to mark your Pell Grants. So you'll notice Pell Grants is listed on there. Other education grants, I've seen this one quite a bit. You have the clients who maybe they'll get a scholarship based on their grades. They've done really well academically in high school and got another scholarship. That could be listed here. The BIA, that's the one for Indian Health Services. Sorry, it is a separate one. Social services, so another social service agency that they could be working with could be listed there. The jobs program, which is also part of the Arizona at Work group and the Wagner-Pizer folks. They could be getting services, maybe medical health services under workman's comp. You'll notice division of DDD is on there. So if they're a dual enrolled client of ours, there's likely some services that they're getting on the other side that you're going to want to mark as a comparable benefit. You'll take a look through those. I think the ones that are probably most frequent would be natural support. If you have clients using PASS or IRWI, which are Social Security programs, Medicare, they're receiving for medical services. And then at the very bottom of that list is public education secondary, which is going to be all your TSW clients or students. So there are a lot of comparable benefit providers. And we often see this, in things like the therapeutic services. If I'm getting behavioral health, maybe it's being paid for somewhere else. Education being paid for somewhere else. Or maybe you have a client whose parents are actively working on something while the client is working on other services that we pay for. So that's kind of how we have these things working in concert together. So just to kind of wrap that up, remember 3 places that we're doing this. In-house services that you are providing, that's giving you credit for the work that you do. Purchased services, which is the services that we open an authorization for. I know the scrolling, I don't want anybody to get seasick, so sorry about that. There you go. So purchased services, those are the authorizations. That's that work that you do to get a vendor engaged. We want to make sure that we document their participation in those. And then comparable benefits. And that's those services that all those partners that you engage are doing to be able to help your client. As I said, as many services as your client is participating in, please give yourselves and your partners credit for the work that's being done each quarter. You can mark as many as you need to. All right, we have 4 minutes on the clock. So if there's a generalized question here, remember you can always type that into the chat. But we also have that document ready to go so that you can put your questions in. And not only can we answer those questions, but we can maybe give you some supportive documentation if necessary to be able to even answer them deeper. We had some great questions in the last session that I think will help all of you just to kind of tie some of those pieces together.
We sure did, Gina. This is Natalie. I'm not going to come on camera. I want you to stay on camera in case in these last few minutes. I think I did see, Alan's asked at least one question here in the chat.
Federal government programs, Ellen. That's a good question. I don't recall seeing that one on the list.
I'll be honest with you. This is Ellen. I've just been putting social services.
It could be social services, or it would not be unheard of to have it fall under other. I do not see anything specific to federal.
And because we've got it for both the deaf and the deafblind, it's going to be, that's a huge one because we don't have to buy phones for people.
Yeah, I think you have that option. Like I said, the nice thing is they give us the other option, so you have that catch-all for something that might not be specifically on that list. Great question.
Thanks for asking that live and putting it on the sheet, Ellen. And what Gina, if she has said this, my apologies, but she goes into this Q&A and she will make sure that, and that's why we ask for your names on that Q&A document, because we absolutely want to make sure that whoever asked that question gets their answered. And for those who are chatting me separately, if you need to go, no worries. This was.
And I will ask further on that to see if anybody else has any suggestions outside, Ellen, just in case. But like I said, you've got a good safety there.
Perfect. I'm just going to go ahead and stop sharing.
All right. Thor, did we help give you a little bit of clarity in this section? Awesome. And for all of the staff that are new to us, you know, obviously this is an area that for those who have been here a while, it can create confusion. So if you're starting off brand new, hopefully this becomes a good tool to help kind of walk you through this section.
And I did see Thor, he did in the chat said, yes, thank you. And lots of people were so glad to hear that this is helpful to you, that you'll be reviewing this information. So again, if you missed the PowerPoint or any of this information, please remember we did record today's session. I will be uploading it into Yes LMS by Friday. So there will be an announcement in Friday's update. So if anyone's missed it, and I'll also be putting the Word document, well, in its own section on our SharePoint as a resource.
I have to tell you guys, I honestly look forward to doing the 911 corrections each quarter because I get to see all of the improvements that are being made in the data entry. So it's been really encouraging to see that and to know that, you know, you guys are using everything. So I do appreciate all of the work that you're doing.
Yes, thank you guys. It is making a difference. Gina mentioned our awards, our team awards earlier, and I believe Kristen said it was a part of the data, and it was 85% improvement. That's incredible.
It's so exciting to see the results.
And you guys are making those changes. That's the thing. Yes, we're here to support you, and I feel it's important. I believe it was Anna Hunter who said, if you talk with a client every day, you are the most important staff that we have, and that is true. So folks like me and Gina, we're here to support you. That's what our main role is, because you're doing the work out there. So as much as you thank us, we thank you because you are doing it. I'm going to go ahead and stop this recording because it is 2:01.